right? This is what we have inside. Of course, it has been one of the biggest ticket issue last week. It's still ongoing. Also, we have Mount Kenya. We have Mount Kenya. As I've mentioned before, the politics continue. And we have also the G2G question, the oil experiments. We have it being headlined as a flop by one of the dailies there, and we can see the conclusion of the advisor, the economic advisor, David Ndii there. What really went a cropper with this? That's the problem question. And still, also, we have Stano in the People Daily. Ndindi, are you the one making the mountain slippery for me? This is what seems to be the question Regardie is asking, as depicted, I should say, here by the People Daily. Holy Court this morning with Danson Mungatana, who's the Senator of Tana River. Also, we have with us Member of Parliament for Seme. This is Dr. Nikal Faramalim as well, Member of Parliament Dadaab. All right, let's just continue press with the conversation, and we want to navel gaze now on the issue of the SHIF, because it seems also the ministry is putting structures in place right now to make sure the deductions happen this month. This is after the court uplifted that particular injunction that was there for people to be deducted, those particular deductions this month. Let's just begin with you, Dr. Nikal, and maybe you can put it into perspective. First of all, we can see the ministry is really under the gun trying to put the proper structures so that we can commence the deductions this month. Will this happen before the public participation?
No, I think it will be a tall order for them. Today is how many days to the end of the month? It's about 8 days to the end of the month. And first of all, they haven't got the regulations. The laws, the 4 laws that were done, were actually basic legal guidelines. Now, if they are now going to implement them, they have to put regulations in place. And those regulations, they need public participation. And after they have done public participations, the regulations should then come to the Committee of Delegated Legislation in Parliament, which will start with the National Assembly, then will go to the Senate. And after that, then they can. I don't see them doing that. And what they are doing now is a lot more complex than what there's been before when it was NHIF. The deduction in NHIF was to a large extent, the money was raised mainly from employed people. Now we have gone ahead and said everybody must do it. So you're not going to start running and deducting it from people who are employed and not putting in place how other people who are not, who are used to be called voluntary contributors, who now by law must contribute. And then you will have to assess income levels, particularly in the rural areas and in businesses. And that is a complex. That actually, in my mind, is more complex than deducting it from employees. And I think they'll have they'll have legal issues again if deductions start just with the employees, which is now a much bigger amount of money that they're going to collect, because before there was a cap at about 1,700 per month. Now there's no cap. There was an attempt in the parliament to cap it to 5,000. But again, that was removed. So now it goes up to 27,000 for those who are earning $1 million and more. So they're going to collect a lot of money. So that they can probably do. But it must also wait for the regulations. Then, how are they putting the structures to put for people in businesses who are not in formal employment? And then when you go, particularly when you go down into the counties, into the constituencies, the rural areas, the people who are running their own business, the matatu people, the people who are running shops, the people who are running bars, including the mamambogas, everybody must pay. So now, what is the structure for assessing what they should pay and who should not pay? And we have said that those who cannot pay, there should be a fund. The government should actually pay for them, or be exempted, but they're exempted and people pay. Now, they are going to do means testing. That is what is proposed. Means testing is a tedious job. you have to identify families who you think cannot pay and therefore need to be paid for. Then you have to actually go into their homes and find out what is their socioeconomic status, what is their source of income, what kind of house they live in, what kind of chamber they have, what animals they have, so that everybody has to pay. And remember, this everybody has to pay was actually what was contentious in court, because again we rushed the law when they said that you have to be registered to access services in public health facilities. Now, that was very profound. It is something we could have actually corrected, because the issue was, if you are not a member, you access public services, but you pay. But as it sounded like if you're not a member, you do not pay. So that was one of the issues. And then they said, you will not access public services if you are not registered. Mm-hmm. And then you are not access public services if you do not have a particular number. Now, these are things that would have been corrected easily if we had not rushed it. So those ones actually have been, the court have said, those ones have still been stopped, those three issues. Mm-hmm. So with those three issues stopped, there's still a lot of work to be done. In summary, I don't think we will be able to do it within this month. And I wonder why. I think sometimes ministers and permanent secretaries in ministries should actually let some work be done by technical people. Mm-hmm. And there's wisdom in, at one point, letting technical people talk once the top level have given policy direction. You are more likely to get a more realistic issue, because at top level we tend to address politics more than service. So that, and even if you look at it, there are actually three laws that the court talked about. There was the chief, and there was also the FIF, and there are also the primary health care. These are also acts that were on their own. Mm-hmm. Now, to me, FIF, Facility Improvement Fund Act, to me, that is probably a much more important act for us, because it attempts to, one, ring-fence the funding for facilities starting from level 2, level 3, level 4, all the way to up to level 5. And it is also giving structures of how these facilities work. Now, what they're supposed to do, these facilities are supposed to have management teams, but they also should have committees that oversight them, which should involve the communities around them. So that with level 2, level 3, virtual dispensaries and health centers, you would have committees, and those committees would have people around them. But within the facility itself, there would be a management team. The same would happen in level 4, which is a sub-county hospital. And even at the county itself, it has proposed that there'll be a county health management team. And then the level 4 will be a county hospital management team, right, and also a board. Now, if you look at it, those have not been put into place.
I wanted just to go blow by blow so that we don't also lose our viewers. So, we go directly to the beneficiary, who is a citizen, and then we'll look also on the administrative bit of it. So yes.
We'll let me go to the benefit.
First of all, from the point of the public participation, everyone is inclined to wonder then, why are we calling for public participation when it seems all this actually has been done and dusted? Everything is in proper place. We have the ministries trying to put up the structures as it is right now. It is like, this is just an exercise for the sake of it, going through the rigmarole to make sure you check out all the boxes so that you do not have a spawning ground for litigation, because this was not put for public participation. But it seems you're just doing it. What will we be putting? Because we look at all this, everything has been, done and dusted and prepared for us.
No, they are not done and dusted. Like I've just asked you. Now, if you are going to get to collect money from people who are not in regular employment, has that structure been put in place? If you are going to put that in place, the structure for collecting money from those people, Is it not important that the people who are going to pay the money, and how are they going to pay? Are you going to pay like Gary where they pay themselves?
Right. But
are you going to, in the rural area, are going to get people's chicken and catch them because they have not paid? So those structures, the people should be involved. Apart from meeting the requirements of the Constitution, the law, that people should be involved. I see a practical need for that public participation, particularly the collection. If you don't want us to talk about the structures and those, but remember, you can collect, but you can have the money. But if you don't have the structures, people will not get the service.
Right. 2.75% seems to be what will be, or this is what has been finalized as a deduction. Where is public participation in this? And how was it arrived at without the public participation?
You see, this is the inability for us to compare. You know, we need to understand how a democratic system works. There is 3 arms of the state. Each one has got independence in its own right. And each one is accountable in a way. Parliament makes the laws. Executive governs and runs the country, levies taxes, collects taxes, runs the country, governs, determines on priorities of development, unhindered. So public participation is a very good, flowery thing that essentially we all would want to say, okay, it's fine. Although there is no act exactly, we have not created a law on exactly how public participation should be done. We don't have a law. It's just like, if you look at some of the other constitutions, we the people, you know, all those inalienable rights, and then you go on in the pursuit of happiness. Look in the American Constitution, pursuit of happiness. What is that? Has that been, is it something that you can quantify or touch or the rest of it? Public participation is essential. But the manner in which it has to be done is, somebody can tell you, we published what you call the piece of legislation. The bill was out there, and people must have seen it, and people must have put their inputs in. There is nothing that says that it's when the people have put their inputs and overwhelming support of the people. When you have a democratic majority of the people in favor of this is when it can push forward. No. The government of the day does what it wants when it comes to governance. It's accountable to the people of Kenya 5 years later. There is something called judicial restraint, and there's something called judicial, what do you call, overreach, and there's something called non-justiciability. Independence of the 3 arms of the government is there as unfettered. And in each one of them, if you have a problem with certain aspects of the judiciary and you're in parliament, you go and enact the laws. The executive cannot micromanage the judiciary. It cannot micromanage what you call the legislature. In the same way, the judiciary cannot run the country from the bench or cannot legislate from the bench.
Right.
You get my point?
Yes, I get
so
your point.
whatever the government decides, let them try and do what they have to do. Let them fail in the manner they're going to fail, what we're talking about right now. If we have a problem ourselves as members of parliament, let's bring in, bills in parliament to shoot down some of these things. There's a certain, what do you call constitutional majority that you basically can override certain aspects of things. You can create a piece of legislation right now to regulate that and say parliament has done this legislation. And if the executive is not willing to assent to it, there is an overriding majority. You can use that overriding majority. If you lose the overriding majority and you can't get it, too bad. The government will run the system, and when it runs that system, the people are going to hold that government accountable after every, what you call right of recall, after every 5 years. That's why when you look at the US, Obama comes with what is called Obamacare. Have you ever seen anybody take Obamacare to court? No. And then when he leaves the place, Trump comes in, he throws everything out of the window. That is the role of the executive. He levies taxes, listen to me, he levies taxes on the rich. The Democrats levy taxes on the rich, massive taxes. The Republicans come and they remove all those taxes from the rich, You see what I mean? And they come up with a trickle down, what they call economics, whatever it is, and basically allow the rich now to enjoy their wealth in the manner that they do. So these are governments. This is when you bring in a government, it does what it wants. The only people it's accountable to who can do an overriding what you call piece of legislation is the parliament. And that's it. Parliament, you see, this is the only country where parliament is discussing a business. And the courts decide that all that business being discussed by parliament is voided. It's null and void. What kind of a court is that? The constitution is very clear. It says judicial review. There's something called judicial review. And judicial review, which by the way, many people are getting rid of it. The UK is getting rid of it. Because there is what you call an overreach of the judiciary. Judicial review, basically the courts can review pieces of legislation, not bills. I don't know whether you're hearing what I'm saying. Pieces of legislation, acts of parliament. When does an act become an act? It becomes a bill, it's passed by parliament, it's assented to the president, then it becomes an act of parliament. It is a legislation that time, piece of legislation. So the only ability that the courts has is to shoot down that piece of legislation if an aggrieved person comes to court and says that, look, this piece of legislation is what is giving me these problems and this piece of legislation is unconstitutional. But this is the courts you have that comes and says, no, parliament cannot deliberate on these things. Parliament cannot do what you call public participation. To say the least, it's ill-informed, ill-educated, ill-learned, is a learned friend, and basically you have a bunch of what you call dimwits out there who think that they can take this country for right. It's a problem, let me be honest with you. I use these very strong adjectives because that's not the way it's to be done. Right. Wait for these things until it comes to you, and then educate or dedicate on it.
All right, thank you. But it's not entirely true when you say that the Obamacare has not been challenged in court. We've seen the legislation being challenged in courts. The Affordable Care Act, the latest I will read here, survived a third major challenge as the Supreme Court on a 7-2 vote turned aside the latest effort by Republicans to kill the healthcare law. So it was challenging.
There's something called judicial restraint. What did the Supreme Court do? It kept away from that.
All right.
It keeps away. It's called judicial restraint. You do not allow judicial activism. You do not also allow judicial, what do you call, overreach.
Okay.
So it's an unwritten law, what do you call, in which the three arms of the government protect one another. Protect in the sense that none of them wants to butt into that. Even if it's taken to court, they will never shoot it down.
All right. Let me hear from Senator Danson.
And even if Trump comes in and throws it out through the window, which he did, by the way, and you try and take it to court, the Supreme Court is going to hesitate completely and exercise what's called judicial restraint.
Thank you. So we have a Kenyan who also is taking special umbrage with this. He went to court, challenged that particular fact that if I'm not registered with SHIF, then I will not be accessing this health facility, or I will not be getting any health care. And he says this is, a violation of the Constitution, right? It is my right to have access to health care in this country. So first of all, beginning from that particular premise, why should I be denied health care if I'm not registered with this particular SHIF Act?
Okay, to those Kenyans who are listening in this discussion, that particular challenge has been taken care of by the Court of Appeal. Like what Dr. Nyikal has said, in the ruling that was released by a 3-bench judge.
This Friday?
Yes. They suspended that particular provision that says that if you are not registered, you cannot access any other government service. Okay? So in a sense, it has been taken care of. But registration to access medical service under the SHIF is going to be compulsory. And then I wanted to clarify something, those who are listening.
Registration is going to be compulsory.
It has to be, because how will they identify you when you come to the medical facility?
But they have my ID.
No. The SHIF card is the one that is going to identify you. It is like, remember, it's a social health insurance fund.
But my ID should suffice. Not as a
You
child
have not, taken out the social health insurance fund. Your ID cannot guarantee you that you are a driver. Just because you have an ID doesn't mean that you can drive a car. So there are certain classes of facilities that, like now we are saying health insurance, you have to pay, and that is going to be the direction. In fact, even if you say you are not able to raise any money, the requirement is that you should be registered so that we know for practical reasons. Once the community health promoters have said you are a person of very, very low means, you can't pay, government will pay for you, but you still have to register so that you will know that you are there. Otherwise, we will not be able to plan for you. You know, you will not be able to know the numbers that are supposed to be accessing this. So how can we plan for the medicine, for the doctors, for the nurses, for the health, physiotherapists and so on? So registration is going to be a necessity. Just like to be registered to be a Kenyan, it's going to be a necessity. But I wanted to clarify something else. You asked, public participation, is it done and dusted? I wanted to answer you. You see, there are two types of laws here. There is the law that is it's called the Act of Parliament. This is the big law. And then there is another type which requires public participation. That's why when the MPs or senators are sitting, at some point the committees will call for public participation. Okay? And then that law goes and then the president signs. That is the Act of Parliament. Okay? But then there is the regulations, what you call subsidiary legislation. Yes, yes. That's the second type of law. The one now that is given by ministers, you know. Mm-hmm. It is the one now we go also through public participation again. Okay? So there are two levels here. So it's not correct to say it's done and dusted. Those regulations that health minister must bring to the National Assembly and the Senate, they must go through public participation. So when they come, and that's why we are saying there's not enough time for it to be effected by the beginning of February. I mean, they can't
end of January.
End of January, they can't start deducting because they have to bring them to the Delegated Legislation Committee. And I am vice chair of the Delegated Legislation Committee in the Senate. So we always advise ministers, bring it before you publish, because we will then raise the issues. Because we will demand, for example, you want to publish, have you taken it through public participation? You want to publish, is this law contrary to the Constitution, the regulation? Is it contrary to the Constitution? Is it contrary to the main act? Because that regulation is supposed to explain the main act. And a good example to those listeners is we can pass a traffic law that says reckless driving is a traffic offense. But then the minister then has to bring regulation that says if you drive beyond 50 kilometers per hour or 30 kilometers per hour, then within town or within this region, you will have been driving carelessly or over speeding. So this regulation explains the main act, the main piece of legislation. But these details cannot be done in Parliament. They are brought by the ministers after he consults his officers. His technocrats. That's how it works. But both of them must go through public legislation. And the basis is this. When Parliament is doing the main act, Article 118 of the Constitution says they must facilitate public participation. Now, the one of the regulation, Article 10 of the Constitution says any public officer, this includes ministers, when they are making policy decisions, there must be public participation. So both of them have constitutional basis. And then the other thing is the Statutory Instruments Act, Section 5 of that Act, now deals with regulations specifically. And they make a specific requirement that they must go to public participation. So if minister is telling Kenyans that they will be able to roll out sufficient public participation within the remaining days, and then they bring it to 2 houses or the 2 committees within the remaining days,
it can't happen.
It is not going to happen.
It's not possible. Yeah.
So I would urge the minister, it is better to be slow and sure, because if you skip one step, Kenyans are waiting for you, and they will take you to court, and you will now go another 2-3 months struggling in the court. And yet we need that law to be effected. Why? For the same reason that the minister made the arguments at the Court of Appeal. She said there are 17 million Kenyans who are not part of this litigation, who are being affected because NHIF is no more, and they are depending on NHIF. This 17 million should be absorbed to the shift SHIF. So we are asking the minister, in fact, I'm using this podium, and I hope he's listening or she's listening to me or his team. Be slow, but be sure. And I would urge them to work with the committees of delegated legislation at the National Assembly and at the Senate, so that they don't miss the steps. If they miss the steps, this thing is going to the air again.
So I just want to say something about what he has just said. That has just said. The constitutional provision says Parliament shall conduct its business in an open manner, and its sittings and those of its committees shall be open to the public and shall facilitate public participation and involvement in the legislative and other business of Parliament and its committees. What that basically entails is that the public have the freedom to come and participate and watch when the committees are making their business, when Parliament is passing these things. It does not mean that Parliament has got to have a process in which it goes around the country and then says we want to have it can choose to do that. But the reality of the matter is this. You have to understand the intent and the object of the framers of this constitution. Basically opening parliamentary business to the public and masses. You see what I mean? It doesn't mean that you have to do special things that you're calling public participation and you're moving from place to place.
No. Mheshimiwa, I disagree.
Just a moment.
We have to tell the truth. No. The courts have said without proper public participation, any law. You don't say that we have sat in Parliament and you are supposed to participate. Hang on. The section, the Article 118 that you are quoting, we are reading that I've quoted, I know it very well. It says Parliament must facilitate public participation. So you must, that's why they advertise. You have to write memorandum. You have to invite them to the committee. That's what it means.
Mheshimiwa, let me just, it goes ahead. Let me tell you one thing. The facilitation, like I was telling you, there's no piece of legislation to define exactly how, like he was saying, regulations has to be there. There is nothing to regulate exactly how public participation has got to be done. Let me just finish. And Part B says, Parliament may not exclude. You're reading these things in tandem with this. Parliament may not exclude the public or any media from any sittings unless in exceptional circumstances. Exceptional circumstances is times when, for example, security, national security, and other things that are done in camera is being done. Exceptional circumstances, the relevant speaker has determined that there are justifiable reasons for exclusion. The speaker then has the discretion to decide where the public as well as the media can be told to go and leave. So it has given this. We don't want to get into a situation in which we have to understand one thing. There is always the 3 arms of the government. There is push and pull. I hear my good old brother here saying ministers have got to do. I know, as Parliament, we have our issues also with the executive. But this has not defined it. If you really want to define exactly how public participation should be done, go and do a piece of legislation and act on that. But as far as the Constitution itself is concerned, it just tells you. I've read it. It's a very small bit. It says Parliament shall conduct the business in an open manner. Conduct the business in an open manner. Allow everybody to come in there. You get my point? Facilitate in the process. Facilitate public participation.
The Constitutional Court interprets this. It's not my interpretation.
Let's come back.
The constitutional law the Constitutional Court has defined what public
I
participation
have a problem
is.
with that thing.
And it is very clear that the public must be given sufficient notice. And there's a lot of...
With the publications also, the daily...
But then, I agree, we need to do a law. In fact, in the Senate, there's a law that is coming up. There's a piece of legislation that is coming up. I think it has gone through the first reading. And maybe when we finish, we'll bring it to the National Assembly. So there's need for that. But as of now, we are guided by what the High Court has interpreted, constitutionally interpreted what public participation is. And it has set the criteria. So we want to say,
thank you.
We need to involve the public,
yes.
As stakeholders. They must come in to give their views on any piece of legislation and regulations.
So the question becomes again, what then is discernibly different with the public participation for the SHIF, the SHIF as you call it, and the affordable housing? Because now we have the members of parliament who will be going in the 19 counties for public participation. What is so different with this structure, even when the court actually has given an injunction about this affordable housing, of which you've stoutly, gone against and go for the public participation? Farah Malik, because you're the one who's saying
I was saying
there's a difference. What's the difference in the public participation there?
Can I explain?
That's
you
can also needs to chime in.
That's a very...
Give him a chance.
I want to make it simpler.
Yeah, we'll come to you, Farah.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll come.
Let me tell you. Let's make it simpler. We have 3 tiers. You have the Constitution, which sets out the general principles on which the country is managed. Then we have the Acts of Parliament, which then puts what should be done.
Yes.
Then the regulations which say how it should be done.
Correct.
Now, in all these, people must participate.
Yes.
And let's not go to the letters of the law and the timelines and so on. Let's look at the rationale. Let's take what we have, the SHIF. The constitutional bit starts from Article 43, which says that health is a right. So financing it must be a right. So now we come to SHIF, which is saying, let's use a social health insurance, which means everybody must pay according to their ability and everybody must get services according to their need. Then we now put the SHIF, which put the act, which says everybody will pay. That is what is said. Everybody will pay in order that we raise money. So people who are employed, it will be deducted. People who are not employed, they will be assessed. That is what the act has said.
Yes.
Now the regulation now is going to say, how do people who are employed pay?
Yes.
How will the deductions be made?
Correct.
When will the deductions be made? What are the penalty if you don't? That is also in the law. But how is that done? Now, that is now where the regulations comes in. But it is easier to understand if you look at people who are in informal employment, some of whom in the rural areas have to be assessed because the law has simply said they must pay and has put a limit. But somebody has to come and say, how do they pay? Who is not unable to pay so that the government pays for them? And in this act, we have said, in the Primary Health Care Act, we have said that primary health care workers or promoters will actually assess these people. That is a means testing. Now, when you are going to collect money from people, because now this is now a regulation, now that is the people have to participate. So basically, at every stage, the people need to participate. That's the rationale. Now, if you go into the letters of the law, it becomes complex. So in my mind, it will be. But the summary is, in truth, the time we have, they will not be able to do it if they have to follow this. This is mine. But I would have liked us to go ahead and say, we are focusing too much on how to collect money. Now, these laws also had an issue on how to utilize the money.
We'll come
because
to the utilization.
It is how that.
Because if we don't also clean up on how the election will be, even if we go to the utilization bit of it, we'll have some challenges.
Okay,
so we need to first.
So, but I think that's the simplest.
Okay.
They can't do it in 80 days. Okay. It's impossible. And let me say, like Honorable Mungatana said, ministers And I'm not talking of this Minister of Health. Ministers must realize when now we want to hear the voice of technical people who knows how this thing will be done. You know, let me tell you this structure, the ban. Now we have the minister is Minister Nakumicha. The PS is Kimutai. The PS is Kimutai, and then the Director of Medical Services is there. Now let's just take the minister, the PS, the finance
DMS.
people, and so on. These people, if you take Minister Nakumicha and PS Kimutai, you can put them in any ministry. They will not define that ministry. If you bring a director of water with this team, that ministry becomes the Ministry of Water.
Yes.
If you bring the director of agriculture, that becomes the Ministry of Agriculture. But you still have the same two people.
Yes.
It is therefore important that the technical people, the technical directorate, once the principle has been made, now takes over. And they know timelines, they know structures, they know procedures, they know how much time it will take and the complexities because they are technical.
The
To
DMS.
me, that is why I would appeal to the minister. At this point, let the technical people have. Don't be driven by political expediency in terms of time. Let the reality dictate the time. Just support and let the technical people work as fast as they can.
But the government is broke. That's why now they actually...
Even when you are broke is when you need better management. When you are broke is when you need better management.
You know, I am debating this thing
Yes, still.
for posterity, not for the current expediency. And I want to tell you how many pieces of legislation have been enacted in this parliament in the last 1 year. Very many. Very many. Is it only the one of housing and this one of health? Why are these ones being taken to court for public participation and all the others? We've never seen any other piece of legislation being taken to court for public participation. I'm giving you an example. Personally, if you're asking me, because I was there in the 10th Parliament, and Mugatana was there, we were together there. Until such a time that we have a piece of an act of parliament that defines exactly how public participation would be done. All that this thing does is tells you is that you have to allow the public to come to the sessions of parliament and the committees. You cannot stop them. And that's exactly the letter, the spirit, and the object of this piece of legislation. Public access, it says, access and participation. To deny people access. And it starts with these things. You know, he will tell you, Parliament shall conduct its business in the open. In the open. In an open manner, and its sittings and those of the committees shall be open to the public. And the heading is public access and participation. And then it goes further and says, and facilitate public participation and involvement in the legislative and other business of Parliament and its committees. And its committees, Parliament and its committees. And then it goes further and says, Parliament may not exclude. The idea is open parliamentary business to the people of Kenya. They come in there. I am a member of the JRAC, Justice and Legal Affairs Committee. And we have so many, what they call committee meetings on pieces of legislations. And we invite the interested parties. We tell them, okay, anybody who's interested will come. It's out there in the media. And we hold these meetings in committee rooms in Parliament. So to say that these two have got to be struck down because of Constitutional Court, it has a problem. That Constitutional Court has failed to grasp exactly the spirit, the object, and the letter of this piece of, what do you call, of Article 118 of the Constitution. As far as I'm concerned, coming in there, participating in there, putting it out in the media, the public, and then it does not say how the public participation or the public ideas on this can be brought on board. You get my point? It doesn't say that if the public is not happy with this, then you throw out the piece of legislation. It just tells you, listen to the people who will come in there and let them also watch. And because the public cannot sit in Parliament and contribute. It can only come to the committee meetings. But here you are told parliamentary business is open to the public. It's open to the public, both in the sense of bills have got to be published, and it's there for public, what do you call, for everybody to see, and this is how it goes through. So we have a problem, and that problem is not just with us. In every country, any democracy which is there, there's always a push and pull between the three arms of the government. Parliament would want to micromanage the executive. It what do you call the judiciary would want to do certain things. Executive would want to do certain things. But the reality of the matter is that each one of them has got a role to play unfettered. And the Constitution has not limited it. If you now go to court and a court tells you that this thing has not had a public participation, and then you go through these articles of the Constitution itself, how do they prove that nobody came in there and listened to it? Because that's all it says here.
Can I answer why now?
Can I just finish?
Yeah.
And as far as regulation is concerned, let me tell you.
So you were raising a very important point.
Fundamental, very fundamental.
Yeah, we wanted to know what was the interpretation of the courts, because it seems there has been an interpretation of the courts.
That's the point.
This,
I think there's a lot of what is called judicial overreach. You get my point? Judicial activism, judicial overreach. Now let me just tell you one. But
isn't that the province of the courts to actually interpret this constitution? Yeah. How then will you say this is a judicial overreach, and this is the province of the courts to make the interpretation on what that particular article is actually?
Let me say something.
Saying.
Dibal.
Yes.
This constitution, like Honorable Professor, Dr. Nyikala said, it gives general principles.
It did.
Yeah, like you say, the right to life, Now, does it mean that I can take my own life or you can carry out abortion? Then that is where the judges, the Constitutional Court, will sit to interpret. And unless that decision is overturned, the Constitution gives them the final say on interpretation, unless that decision is overturned. So what Mheshimiwa Farah Maalim is saying is at the theoretical level. But I want to tell him that actually the court has sat many times on this to interpret the principle of public participation. And there's been several interpretations, saying that there's got to be, maybe, for example, the venue must, you should prove public participation. The venue must be there. The courts have said you should show the number of people. That is the interpretation that attended.
How do you interpret
this? You should show the agenda, that took place. Show the agenda of that meeting, show who attended and what was discussed. If you attach that, let me finish that. When you finish to show that, then you have proved that there was public participation. And any person who comes to challenge that piece of legislation in court will be told, no, that's not, you cannot say there was no public participation.
Okay, but I wanted to ask a simple question, because Farah is onto something as well.
Yes.
Because all these things that you're talking about, the venue, the agenda,
where did you get it from?
They need to, can I challenge it and say that was not a parliamentary session? Because also it was not held within the precincts of Parliament.
No.
If you bring it,
listen.
Do you know all of us agree?
When we went to Turkana, we were not sitting in the Senate, but that was a parliamentary session. The Parliament can designate.
It is because maybe someone has not challenged it.
No. Parliament can designate. It can designate where to sit, and it becomes a parliamentary
seat. Let's say from Nika.
Do you know what the bar? Do you know we all agree?
No, we don't. Then we should.
We do. Let me tell you why I say we agree. Honorable Farah is right that all these processes need an act of parliament to do with public participation.
Absolutely.
Now, Honorable Mungatana also agrees, and had actually even earlier said there is a law that is coming, and Honorable Mungatana is saying there has been court has asked these questions: where will it be, what time, what you must do. Those are things that we actually need. As he said, there's a law coming from the Senate, put them together into an act. And then we must agree, we have only 10 years with the Constitution. Constitution lasts long. So as we go along, we find gaps. Now, so we all agree that the Constitution is very clear on what should be done. We are also taking, trying to put it in place by doing public participation. But I think all of us here agree there's need to be a specific act which talks about public participation. Now, that will definitely come. But let me ask you why, he asked himself the question, why now? There's another factor.
Why on these two pieces of legislation?
Yeah, I'm telling you that
yes,
now.
Yes, yes.
Why these two pieces of legislation?
Yes.
One, when they touch on people's lives, salaries and health and so on, that's number one. So they're very important to the people, and politicians, MPs, senators are very sensitive, and the general public and lobbyists, activists are also very important, very sensitive to that. So they are being really watched. Two, we have a situation in Parliament now where we have an absolute majority in Parliament. Three, the current, the executive now is keen to get these things done. So what is happening? The executive is coming with things that in principle may be good for the country. They are rushing it through Parliament. And because it is being rushed through Parliament, certain things that would have been looked at, that if we had a more robust public participation law, would have taken care of that. Now, Parliament would have now to need to, both Senate and National, would now need to be more careful, look at things in greater detail. And that is not happening because you go to Parliament, I've told you that, I don't want to go, I know you have had it too many times, we rush things over. And I just want to give you one example. This thing of you cannot access public health services if you are not registered. Now, it didn't say what you are not registered for. It left it, what it meant is registered for chief. But being registered for chief should not stop you from getting public health services. It is just that you get it, but chief will not pay for you. Now, that is where the problem is. So now, had we spent, and some of us raised that, had we spent more time, we had gone into the nitty-gritty of that and got it out. But even if we passed it as we did, if we had a more robust public participation as will come, that will now say being registered for what. So it is this situation we are in that is making things go as they are. And now we are getting a lot of more suits. And me, I would say that, as Honorable Mungatana said, we need to move fast as Parliament and actually put a law on public participation.
Indeed. Why have you also been actually slow off the mark in coming up with this particular legislation? We need to wind up on it briefly.
Yeah, can I just tell you?
Before I take a short break?
Can I just tell you? Do you know that there are two ministries in this country that can levy taxes, can bring out regulations without necessarily referring it to Parliament? Do you know which those two ministries are? The Minister of Health and the Minister of Finance. They don't have to necessarily come to Parliament to get an approval of that. If he wants to quarantine a whole section of this country tomorrow, or say that such and such medicine should be stopped because of the technical, important medical, whatever, they don't have to come to Parliament. If the Minister for Finance would want to levy certain taxes, he doesn't have to necessarily come to Parliament. We're going to have a new commission which is going to be formed purely for taxation. We passed it in Parliament, in what do you call, in the National Assembly. Maybe that will change now under this new dispensation that we're trying to get into.
I'm bringing you to the old thing.
Right,
this one of Minister of Health, I'll tell you where it is arising from. We have the Public Health Act,
Absolutely.
which was there long before independence.
Yes.
Although we have made laws, we have not repealed it.
It's not repealed.
So from time to time,
it's not amended.
When we find it,
it's not amended. Can I just finish? It's not repealed. It's not amended. We do not have a new, what they call, we still have the old. The same also goes for what they call Minister of Finance. Let me just finish.
But when do we call that Public Health Act into action? Is when we have, threatening public health care, like COVID-19. It is not for taxation and regulations.
Taxation is not the Minister of Health. Taxation is finance. Yes. It's finance. And I'm just telling you, taxation is finance.
All right, the deductions.
And by the way, regulations, also there's a provision that says that regulations If Parliament does not pass regulations within a certain period, it comes into force automatically.
We need to take a short break.
I'm trying. You see, when somebody says that and even defines the manner in which public participation should be done, the Constitutional Court even defines and says you must come together. Where do they get it from? It's not here in the Constitution. Where do they get it from? Like what I'm telling you, that they're trying to legislate from the bench. They're trying to run the executive from the bench, which is wrong for this country. Let me tell you one thing. I want us to get everything right.
All right. We need to take a short break right now. When we circle back, of course, we shall be looking at now that we have Parliament in recess and we have this legislation that we still have the minister trying to put a proper structure so that we might have deductions by the end of this month. Are there any indications that there might be a special sitting in light of this? And if at all, how fast will that be? Because it has to also be debated in both houses, go through the National Assembly, pick up by the Senate, and then we have a final, of course, decision